The tech billionaire's frustrated Mandarin echoed through the penthouse boardroom, and when only the catering staff member quietly answered back in perfect Chinese, the entire room fell silent. What happened next would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The crystal chandelier cast prismatic shadows across the mahogany conference table as tensions reached a breaking point in the 52nd floor boardroom of the Meridian Tower. For 6 grueling hours, the merger negotiations between TechVision Industries and Beijing's Golden Dragon Enterprises had deteriorated from cautious optimism to barely concealed hostility. The acquisition deal, worth $12 billion and representing the largest technology transfer agreement between American and Chinese companies in the past decade, now teetered on the precipice of complete collapse. Marcus Chen, the enigmatic founder and CEO of Golden Dragon Enterprises, had flown in from Shanghai with his team of 6 advisors, each more stone-faced than the last. Across from them sat the executives of TechVision Industries, led by their ambitious CEO, Victoria Sterling, a woman whose reputation for closing impossible deals had earned her a place on 3 magazine covers this year alone. Between them lay scattered documents, abandoned coffee cups, and the remnants of what had started as a promising partnership discussion. The source of the current impasse centered on intellectual property rights and technology transfer protocols. TechVision had developed revolutionary quantum computing algorithms that could potentially revolutionize everything from financial modeling to climate prediction. Golden Dragon, meanwhile, controlled the manufacturing infrastructure and rare earth mineral supply chains necessary to bring such technology to global markets. On paper, the partnership made perfect sense. In practice, cultural misunderstandings and legal complexities had created an seemingly insurmountable divide. Victoria Sterling had assembled what she considered her strongest negotiating team. Robert Hayes, her chief legal counsel, possessed an impressive track record of international contract negotiations. Dr. Sarah Kim, head of technology transfer, held dual PhDs in computer science and international business. The crown jewel of their preparation had been hiring the Manhattan-based firm of Global Language Solutions, which had provided 2 of their most experienced Mandarin interpreters. Both interpreters carried impressive credentials, including diplomatic training and years of experience in high-level corporate negotiations. Yet, despite these preparations, communication had become increasingly strained as the day progressed. Marcus Chen, who had initially conducted the morning sessions in heavily accented but functional English, had grown progressively more frustrated with the nuanced legal and technical discussions. His team, meanwhile, seemed to withdraw further into themselves with each passing hour, conducting hushed conversations in rapid Mandarin that left the American team feeling increasingly excluded. The breaking point came when Victoria presented what she believed to be a reasonable compromise on the revenue-sharing structure for the Asian markets. The proposal involved a tiered system where Golden Dragon would receive increasing percentages of profits as production volumes scaled, while TechVision retained majority control over core algorithmic developments. To Victoria, this represented a significant concession from their original position. To Marcus Chen, however, the proposal apparently carried implications that neither the American team nor their interpreters fully grasped. Marcus Chen's response was immediate and visceral. He leaned back in his leather chair, his expression shifting from careful neutrality to obvious displeasure, and launched into a rapid-fire stream of Mandarin directed at his advisors. His tone carried frustration and what sounded like incredulity, his gestures becoming more animated as he spoke. The 2 professional interpreters, both of whom had handled complex negotiations for Fortune 500 companies, exchanged uncertain glances as they struggled to follow the technical terminology mixed with what appeared to be regional dialectical expressions. Victoria watched this exchange with growing alarm. 3 months of preliminary discussions, countless hours of due diligence, and the promise of revolutionizing global technology distribution all seemed to be evaporating before her eyes. The interpreters were clearly struggling, offering only fragmented translations that seemed to miss the emotional context of Marcus Chen's concerns entirely. One interpreter ventured that Mr. Chen was expressing concerns about long-term strategic positioning, while the other suggested he was questioning the technical feasibility of the proposed timeline. Robert Hayes, the chief legal counsel, attempted to intervene with a clarifying question about specific contract clauses, but Marcus Chen waved him off with visible irritation, continuing his heated discussion with his team in Mandarin. The American executives found themselves relegated to the role of confused observers, watching what appeared to be the dissolution of the most important deal in their company's history unfold in a language they could not understand. Dr. Sarah Kim tried a different approach, pulling up technical specifications on her laptop and turning the screen toward the Chinese delegation, hoping that visual aids might bridge the communication gap. But Marcus Chen barely glanced at the display, instead addressing one of his senior advisors in increasingly urgent tones. The advisor, a middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair, responded in equally rapid Mandarin, shaking her head emphatically at several points. Victoria felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same sensation she had experienced years earlier when a crucial pharmaceutical licensing deal had collapsed due to regulatory misunderstandings. The difference was that this time, the stakes were exponentially higher. TechVision had invested heavily in the quantum computing research, and without access to Golden Dragon's manufacturing capabilities and supply chains, their breakthrough technology might remain commercially unviable for years. The room's atmosphere grew increasingly tense as Marcus Chen's voice rose slightly, clearly expressing frustration not just with the terms being discussed, but apparently with the entire negotiation process. His advisors nodded grimly at whatever points he was making, occasionally interjecting with their own observations in Mandarin. The American interpreters continued their increasingly futile attempts to provide real-time translation, but their fragmented efforts only seemed to highlight the growing communication chasm. It was at this moment of maximum tension that an unexpected voice entered the conversation. The words came from the back corner of the room, spoken in clear, confident Mandarin with what sounded like a Beijing accent. Every head in the room turned toward the source of the voice, their expressions ranging from surprise to shock. Standing near the catering station, where she had been quietly refreshing the tea service and arranging fresh fruit platters, was Elena Rodriguez. She wore the standard black uniform of Meridian Catering Services, her dark hair pulled back in a professional bun, and had been so unobtrusive throughout the day that most of the negotiators had forgotten her presence entirely. Now she stood with perfect posture, addressing Marcus Chen directly in fluent Mandarin, her voice carrying the confidence of someone completely comfortable with the language. The silence that followed Elena's intervention was absolute and profound. Marcus Chen's expression transformed from frustration to astonishment, while his advisors stared at the young woman in undisguised amazement. The TechVision executives appeared frozen, uncertain whether they were witnessing a helpful intervention or a catastrophic breach of protocol. Victoria Sterling felt her mouth fall open slightly as she processed the impossibility of what she was hearing. Robert Hayes half rose from his chair, clearly intending to address what he perceived as an inappropriate interruption by service staff. But Victoria placed a restraining hand on his arm, her instincts telling her that something significant was happening, even if she couldn't understand the words being exchanged. The professional interpreters looked mortified, apparently realizing that their expertise was being demonstrated as inadequate by someone they had barely noticed. Marcus Chen responded to Elena in Mandarin, his tone conveying both surprise and curiosity. Elena replied with what appeared to be respectful confidence, continuing in fluent Mandarin while maintaining appropriate eye contact and posture. The exchange continued for nearly a minute, with Marcus Chen's expression shifting from surprise to genuine interest. His advisors leaned forward, clearly engaged by whatever Elena was explaining to them. Finally, Marcus Chen switched to English, addressing Elena directly. His accent remained pronounced, but his words were clear and deliberate. "You speak northern Beijing dialect very well," he said, studying Elena with new attention. "How does a catering worker in New York come to speak our language so fluently?" Elena responded in English, though she had demonstrated her ability to continue in Mandarin. "I studied Mandarin and international business at Columbia University, Mr. Chen. I also spent 4 years working in Beijing before returning to the United States." She paused, then added with quiet confidence, "I believe there may be some misunderstandings about the technical specifications that are causing unnecessary concern." Victoria Sterling found her voice, though it came out slightly higher than usual. "Miss Rodriguez, I appreciate your linguistic abilities, but we have professional interpreters handling this negotiation." Even as she spoke the words, Victoria realized how hollow they sounded, given the obvious communication failures that had been occurring. Elena nodded respectfully toward Victoria, then addressed Marcus Chen again in Mandarin. Whatever she said caused him to lean back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. He replied in Mandarin, and Alina responded with what appeared to be detailed explanations, occasionally gesturing toward the technical documents spread across the conference table. One of Marcus Chen's senior advisors, the silver-haired woman who had been most vocal in their earlier discussions, spoke up in Mandarin. Elena listened carefully, then responded with what seemed to be clarification or elaboration. The advisor's expression shifted from skepticism to interest, and she exchanged meaningful glances with Marcus Chen. Dr. Sarah Kim, who had been watching this exchange with growing fascination, finally spoke up. "Excuse me, Miss Rodriguez, but do you understand the technical aspects of what we're discussing here? This involves highly complex quantum computing algorithms and international technology transfer protocols." Elena turned to Dr. Kim with a slight smile. "I have a master's degree in international business with a focus on technology transfer, Dr. Kim. I also completed specialized coursework in emerging technologies and their commercial applications." She paused, seeming to consider her next words carefully. "I spent 3 years working for the Beijing Technology Development Corporation, specifically in their International Partnerships Division." The revelation hung in the air like a physical presence. Robert Hayes, still processing the implications, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "If you have those qualifications, why are you working for a catering company?" Elena's expression remained composed, though a flicker of something, perhaps resignation or determination, crossed her features. The 2020 economic disruption eliminated many positions in international business, particularly for those without extensive professional networks. When my student visa expired and I returned to the United States, I needed immediate employment to support myself while pursuing additional certifications. She gestured slightly toward her uniform. "Meridian Catering offers flexible scheduling that allows me to attend evening classes while maintaining steady income." Marcus Chen had been listening to this exchange with evident interest. Now he addressed Elena directly, switching back to Mandarin. Whatever he said caused Elena to nod thoughtfully before responding in the same language. Their conversation continued for several minutes, with Marcus Chen's advisors occasionally interjecting questions or comments. Victoria watched this linguistic dance with a mixture of fascination and growing alarm. The most important negotiation in TechVision's history was apparently being conducted by a catering worker who had materialized from the background like a character in a business thriller novel. Yet she could not ignore the dramatic change in Marcus Chen's demeanor. Where minutes earlier he had seemed ready to walk away from the table, he now appeared engaged and interested. When the Mandarin conversation concluded, Marcus Chen addressed the room in English. "Ms. Rodriguez has identified several critical misunderstandings that have been complicating our discussions. Your interpreters, while professionally trained, lack familiarity with specific technical terminology and cultural context that are essential for this type of negotiation." He gestured toward Elena, who had remained standing near the catering station, somehow managing to look both professional and appropriately deferential despite having just inserted herself into a $12 billion negotiation. "Ms. Rodriguez, however, understands both the technical concepts we are discussing and the cultural nuances that have been causing confusion." Victoria felt reality shifting beneath her feet like sand. "Mr. Chen, are you suggesting that we continue this negotiation with assistance from hotel catering staff?" Marcus Chen's expression grew slightly stern. "I am suggesting, Ms. Sterling, that effective communication requires more than professional credentials. It requires understanding of context, culture, and technical specificity." He looked directly at Elena. "Ms. Rodriguez possesses all 3 qualifications." Elena stepped forward slightly, addressing both parties with quiet confidence. "If I may, the core disagreement appears to center on intellectual property protection and technology transfer timelines. Mr. Chen's concerns are not primarily about profit sharing, but about ensuring that Golden Dragon maintains strategic autonomy in their domestic markets while still benefiting from TechVision's innovations." She turned to Victoria. "Your proposal, while financially reasonable, inadvertently suggested a dependency relationship that would be culturally problematic for Golden Dragon's board of directors. In Chinese business culture, maintaining face and strategic independence often takes precedence over short-term financial gains." The explanation was so clear and logical that Victoria felt almost embarrassed for not understanding these nuances earlier. "Ms. Rodriguez, Would you be willing to help us restructure our proposal to address these concerns? Before Elena could respond, Dr. Sarah Kim leaned forward with obvious curiosity. Ms. Rodriguez, you mentioned working for Beijing Technology Development Corporation. That's one of China's most prestigious technology transfer organizations. What was your specific role there? Elena's professional composure remained steady. I was a senior analyst in their International Partnerships Division, focusing on quantum computing and artificial intelligence applications. I worked primarily on evaluating American and European technologies for potential licensing and joint development agreements. The words hit the room like a thunderbolt. Robert Hayes actually dropped his pen, while Victoria felt her preconceptions crumbling in real time. Marcus Chen nodded with what appeared to be recognition. Beijing Technology Development Corporation has an excellent reputation for technical analysis, he commented. Their partnership evaluations are highly regarded throughout the industry. Elena inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement. Thank you, Mr. Chen. I had the privilege of working with some of the field's leading experts during my time there. Victoria's mind raced as she processed the extraordinary turn of events. The woman who had been invisibly serving tea and arranging fruit had not only the linguistic skills to bridge their communication gap, but apparently possessed direct professional experience in exactly the type of technology transfer they were attempting to negotiate. It was so improbable that it felt like fiction, yet the evidence was undeniable. Miss Rodriguez, Victoria said carefully, would you be willing to assist us in restructuring this negotiation? We would, of course, compensate you appropriately for consulting services. Elena glanced at her watch, a simple digital timepiece that seemed incongruous with her demonstrated expertise. I would be honored to help facilitate better understanding between both parties. However, I should mention that I have evening classes starting at 7 o'clock. If you need extended assistance, I would need to make arrangements with my supervisor. Marcus Chen rose from his chair, a gesture of respect that surprised everyone in the room. Miss Rodriguez, your intervention today has been most valuable. If you are available, I would very much like to continue this discussion with your assistance tomorrow. Victoria nodded emphatically. Absolutely. I'll speak with Meridian Catering personally to arrange your schedule. She paused, then added with newfound humility. And I'll ensure that your consulting fee reflects the true value of your expertise. Elena smiled, the first genuine expression of pleasure she had shown since her unexpected intervention. I appreciate your consideration. I should be available after 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. As Elena prepared to leave for her classes, Marcus Chen approached her with obvious respect. Miss Rodriguez, your understanding of both technical concepts and cultural nuances is impressive. May I ask what you are currently studying? I'm completing a PhD in International Technology Policy at Columbia, Elena replied. My dissertation focuses on cross-cultural barriers in quantum computing commercialization. The perfect relevance of her academic focus to their current negotiation was almost too coincidental to believe, yet no one in the room doubted her sincerity. Marcus Chen extended his hand in a formal handshake, another gesture of respect that would have been unthinkable hours earlier, when Elena had been merely part of the invisible service staff. I look forward to continuing our conversation tomorrow, Dr. Rodriguez, he said, using her academic title despite her not having completed her degree yet. After Elena had gathered her things and left for her evening classes, an uncomfortable silence settled over the boardroom. The professional interpreters began packing their materials with obvious embarrassment, while the negotiating teams sat processing what had just occurred. Marcus Chen was the first to break the silence, addressing Victoria directly. Miss Sterling, in my experience, American businesses often focus heavily on credentials and formal qualifications while overlooking practical expertise and cultural understanding. Victoria had the grace to look embarrassed. I have to admit, Mr. Chen, we completely failed to recognize Miss Rodriguez's capabilities. It's a humbling experience. One of Marcus Chen's advisors, the silver-haired woman who had been skeptical earlier, spoke up in accented but clear English. In our preliminary research on your company, we found many impressive technical achievements. But today we discovered that your most valuable resource was serving tea in the corner of the room. Robert Hayes shook his head in bewilderment. I still can't quite believe what just happened. A catering worker with a PhD in exactly the field we're negotiating about, who happens to speak fluent Mandarin and has direct professional experience in Chinese technology transfer. Dr. Sarah Kim, who had been quiet during this exchange, looked thoughtful. It makes me wonder how many other talented people we encounter every day without really seeing them. The person who cleans our offices, the security guard in the lobby, the driver who delivers our packages. How many of them have stories and capabilities we never imagine? Victoria nodded slowly, Marcus Chen's earlier words about American business practices echoing in her mind. I think, she said carefully, that Miss Rodriguez has taught us something important today, beyond just helping with our negotiation. Marcus Chen smiled, the first genuinely warm expression he had shown all day. Indeed, there is an old Chinese proverb that says, do not judge a person by their appearance. Judge them by their actions and wisdom. Today, a young woman serving tea demonstrated more wisdom than many highly paid consultants I have encountered. The following morning brought a transformation that extended far beyond Elena's change of clothing. When she arrived at the Meridian Tower boardroom at precisely 2:15, she wore a tailored navy blue suit and carried a professional leather briefcase instead of a catering tray. But the more significant transformation was in how the other participants perceived and interacted with her. Marcus Chen greeted her with the respectful attention one shows to a valued colleague, while Victoria and her team had clearly spent the intervening hours adjusting their mental framework for the woman they had previously overlooked. Even the building's security staff treated her differently, having been briefed that she was now a consultant rather than catering personnel. Dr. Rodriguez, Victoria began, still using the academic title despite Elena not having completed her dissertation. Before we begin today's sessions, I wanted to apologize for yesterday. Our failure to recognize your expertise was inexcusable. Elena accepted the apology with gracious professionalism. These situations happen more often than you might think, Ms. Sterling. The important thing is that we can now focus on finding solutions that work for both parties. What followed over the next 2 days was unlike any negotiation session the TechVision executives had previously experienced. Elena positioned herself not as a simple interpreter, but as a cultural and technical bridge between the two sides. Her unique combination of advanced technical knowledge, direct experience with Chinese business practices, and fluent bilingual capabilities allowed her to identify and resolve misunderstandings that had seemed insurmountable. When Marcus Chen expressed concerns about intellectual property protection in the Chinese market, Elena was able to explain to the TechVision team that his worries stemmed not from distrust, but from Chinese regulatory requirements and cultural expectations about technology sovereignty. When Victoria's team insisted on specific performance benchmarks, Elena helped Marcus Chen understand that these requirements reflected American corporate governance standards rather than implications of distrust. Elena's most significant contribution came in restructuring the revenue-sharing arrangement. Drawing on her experience with Beijing Technology Development Corporation, she crafted a framework that preserved Golden Dragon's strategic autonomy while meeting TechVision's profitability requirements. The solution involved a tiered partnership structure where Golden Dragon would gradually increase their technical capabilities and market responsibilities over a 5-year period, eventually becoming full partners rather than simply manufacturers. By the afternoon of the second day, the atmosphere in the boardroom had transformed completely. Marcus Chen's advisors were engaged in productive discussions with TechVision's technical team, sketching out implementation timelines and resource allocation strategies. The professional interpreters who had been quietly replaced were no longer needed, as Elena seamlessly facilitated communication between both groups. Miss Rodriguez, Marcus Chen said as the day's formal sessions concluded, your contribution to these negotiations has been extraordinary. You have not simply translated words, but built bridges between cultures and concepts. Elena smiled with quiet satisfaction. Thank you, Mr. Chen. It's gratifying to see both sides working toward common goals. Victoria, who had been conferring with her legal team, approached with obvious respect in her manner. Elena, I hope you'll consider a permanent consulting relationship with TechVision. Your expertise in international technology transfer is exactly what we need as we expand into global markets. Before Elena could respond, Marcus Chen made his own offer. Dr. Rodriguez, Golden Dragon Enterprises, is establishing a new international partnerships division here in New York. We need someone who understands both American innovation culture and Chinese business practices. Would you be interested in discussing a senior position with us? Elena looked between the two offers, both representing dramatic career advancement from her position with Meridian Catering just 3 days earlier. "I'm honored by both opportunities," she replied diplomatically. "However, my immediate priority is completing my dissertation. I would welcome discussing both possibilities after I defend my PhD next spring." Marcus Chen nodded approvingly. Academic achievement should always take priority. Excellence in education reflects character and commitment. Victoria agreed enthusiastically. "Absolutely. And Elena, please know that TechVision would be happy to support your research financially if that would help you focus on completing your degree." The offers represented more than just career opportunities. They symbolized a complete transformation in how Elena was perceived and valued. 3 days earlier, she had been invisible background staff. Now, 2 major corporations were competing for her expertise. As the negotiating teams prepared to sign the preliminary agreements that would launch the $12 billion partnership, Elena gathered her materials with quiet dignity. Her consulting fee from TechVision would cover her living expenses for the next 6 months, allowing her to reduce her catering hours and focus on completing her dissertation research. "Dr. Rodriguez," said Dr. Sarah Kim, approaching as others were leaving, "I wanted to thank you personally. Watching you work these past few days has been inspiring. You've shown me that expertise and intelligence can be found in the most unexpected places." Elena appreciated the sentiment. "Thank you, Dr. Kim. I think we all learned something valuable about assumptions and perceptions." 6 months later, the groundbreaking ceremony for the TechVision Golden Dragon quantum computing manufacturing facility attracted international media attention. The partnership was hailed as a breakthrough in Sino-American technological cooperation, with industry analysts predicting revolutionary advances in quantum computing applications. Photos showed Victoria Sterling and Marcus Chen cutting ribbons and shaking hands as construction crews prepared to begin work on what would become a landmark facility. What the press coverage didn't capture was the story behind the successful negotiations. How a presumed catering worker had transformed a failing deal through her unexpected expertise and cultural insight. Nor did the articles mention that Dr. Elena Rodriguez, having successfully defended her dissertation on cross-cultural barriers in quantum computing commercialization, had accepted a position as Director of International Partnerships for the joint venture, with offices in both New York and Shanghai. On her first day in her corner office at TechVision headquarters, Elena found an elegant gift box on her desk. Inside was a beautiful jade pen set in a traditional Chinese case, inscribed with characters that translated to, "Wisdom reveals itself through action, not appearance." The accompanying note, written in Marcus Chen's careful English, read simply, "To Dr. Rodriguez, who reminded us that true expertise often hides in plain sight. May you continue to bridge cultures and build understanding." Elena placed the pen set carefully on her desk, a reminder of the unexpected moment when a tech billionaire had spoken in frustrated Mandarin and only the catering worker had responded, changing the trajectory of a $12 billion deal and challenging every assumption in that boardroom. As she prepared for her first executive meeting, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The years of invisible work, the financial struggles, the long hours balancing catering shifts with graduate studies, had all led to this opportunity to make a meaningful impact on international technology cooperation. She thought about the other service workers throughout the building, the security guards, the cleaning staff, the delivery personnel, each with their own stories, educations, and capabilities that remained largely unseen by the executives hurrying past them each day. Some might be putting themselves through school. Others might be overqualified immigrants rebuilding their careers. Still others might possess talents and insights that could surprise everyone if given the chance to be seen and heard. Elena's story had become one of recognition and opportunity, but she knew that countless others remained invisible, their potential unrecognized, waiting for their own moment to step forward and challenge the assumptions of those who had the power to see them truly. The transformation in how Elena was perceived began immediately the next morning. When she arrived at the Meridian Tower at precisely 2:15 in the afternoon, the lobby security guard, who had barely acknowledged her existence for months now, greeted her by name and provided a visitor's badge marked consultant rather than directing her to the service entrance. The elevator operator, who had previously seen her only as invisible catering staff, now treated her with the professional courtesy reserved for executives and important business visitors. Elena had chosen her attire carefully for this new role. The navy blue suit she wore was modest but impeccably tailored, purchased during her graduate school years for job interviews that had never materialized due to the economic downturn. Her leather briefcase, a graduation gift from her mother, contained copies of her academic transcripts, professional certifications, and research notes on quantum computing commercialization. The contrast with her previous catering uniform was striking, but the more profound change was in the way others now saw and interacted with her. Marcus Chen was waiting in the boardroom when she arrived, reviewing documents with his senior advisor. He rose immediately upon her entrance, extending his hand in the formal greeting one offers to respected colleagues. The gesture was significant in Chinese business culture, indicating that Elena had earned genuine respect rather than mere politeness. "Dr. Rodriguez," Marcus Chen said, using her academic title despite her not having completed her dissertation defense yet. "I trust you had a productive evening of study. I have been looking forward to continuing our discussion about the partnership framework." Elena accepted his greeting with appropriate professionalism, while maintaining the cultural sensitivity she had demonstrated the previous day. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. I spent the evening reviewing the technical specifications and regulatory requirements for quantum computing technology transfer. I believe I may have identified some additional areas where we can create mutual benefit." Victoria Sterling arrived moments later with her core team, and the difference in her demeanor toward Elena was immediately apparent. Where the previous day Victoria had seemed uncomfortable with Elena's unexpected intervention, she now approached her with the respectful attention typically reserved for high-level consultants and technical experts. "Elena," Victoria began, then caught herself and smiled. "I hope it's appropriate for me to use your first name. I wanted to thank you again for yesterday's breakthrough. My team spent the evening reviewing your suggestions, and we believe your framework could revolutionize how we approach international partnerships." Elena nodded graciously. "Of course, Ms. Sterling. I appreciate your willingness to consider new approaches to these complex challenges." Dr. Sarah Kim, who had been among the most skeptical of Elena's qualifications the previous day, now approached with obvious respect and curiosity. "Elena, I've been thinking about your background in Beijing Technology Development Corporation. Your experience there must have given you unique insights into how Chinese organizations evaluate American technologies." Elena's response demonstrated the depth of knowledge that had been hidden beneath her catering uniform. The evaluation process in China focuses heavily on long-term strategic value rather than short-term profit maximization. Chinese organizations, particularly state-affiliated ones like Golden Dragon, view technology partnerships as building blocks for sustained competitive advantage rather than simple licensing arrangements. She turned toward Marcus Chen and continued in fluent Mandarin, explaining concepts that the professional interpreters had struggled with the previous day. Marcus Chen responded enthusiastically, and their technical discussion continued for several minutes while the American team listened with growing appreciation for Elena's linguistic fluency and subject matter expertise. When Elena switched back to English to include the TechVision team, she seamlessly translated not just the words, but the cultural and strategic concepts that Marcus Chen had been expressing. Mr. Chen is particularly interested in the potential for establishing joint research facilities that would allow both companies to collaborate on next-generation quantum applications. This approach would create shared intellectual property while respecting both parties' strategic autonomy. Robert Hayes, the chief legal counsel who had been skeptical of Elena's involvement, now leaned forward with genuine interest. "Elena, that's a sophisticated approach to intellectual property sharing. How would such an arrangement address regulatory concerns in both jurisdictions?" Elena's answer revealed the extent of her expertise in international technology, law, and policy. She outlined a framework that would satisfy American export control requirements while meeting Chinese technology sovereignty concerns, drawing on specific case studies from her research and professional experience. Her explanations were detailed, technically accurate, and demonstrated a level of knowledge that exceeded what many specialized consultants could provide. As the morning progressed, Elena's role evolved from simple interpreter to strategic advisor and cultural bridge. She helped both sides understand not just what the other was saying, but why they were saying it and what underlying concerns or opportunities they were expressing. Her unique combination of technical knowledge, cultural fluency, and professional experience allowed her to identify solutions that neither side had considered independently. The breakthrough moment came when Elena proposed a three-phase partnership structure that would address all parties' core concerns while creating new opportunities for collaboration. Drawing on her dissertation research, she explained how quantum computing commercialization required different approaches in different markets, but that these differences could become competitive advantages rather than obstacles. The first phase would focus on manufacturing partnership and technology transfer, Elena explained, sketching diagrams on the whiteboard as she spoke. Golden Dragon would establish production capabilities using TechVision's quantum algorithms, but both parties would invest jointly in research and development for the next generation of applications. Marcus Chen's senior advisor, the silver-haired woman who had been most skeptical the previous day, asked detailed questions about intellectual property protection and technology sovereignty. Elena answered in fluent Mandarin, providing explanations that demonstrated her understanding of Chinese regulatory frameworks and business culture. The second phase would involve joint research facilities in both countries, Elena continued, switching back to English to ensure the TechVision team remained fully engaged. This would allow both organizations to develop complementary expertise while maintaining their individual strategic advantages. Victoria Sterling could see the elegance of Elena's proposed framework. Rather than a simple licensing arrangement or manufacturing partnership, Elena was describing a genuine collaboration that would benefit both parties while respecting their different corporate cultures and strategic priorities. The third phase would establish independent subsidiary companies in key international markets, Elena concluded. These subsidiaries would be jointly owned and managed, allowing both TechVision and Golden Dragon to compete globally while leveraging their combined capabilities. Dr. Sarah Kim was taking careful notes as Elena spoke, clearly impressed by the sophistication of her strategic thinking. Elena, this framework addresses concerns I didn't even realize we needed to consider. Your understanding of both the technical challenges and the business dynamics is remarkable. Marcus Chen nodded emphatically. Dr. Rodriguez has identified opportunities that our separate teams had not recognized. This approach would allow Golden Dragon to achieve our strategic objectives while providing TechVision with access to markets and capabilities that would otherwise be difficult to develop independently. The remainder of the day was spent developing the details of Elena's proposed framework. Her role had completely transformed from invisible service worker to central strategic advisor, and both negotiating teams deferred to her expertise on technical, cultural, and regulatory matters. The professional interpreters had been quietly released, as Elena's linguistic abilities far exceeded their capabilities, particularly in the specialized terminology of quantum computing and international business. Elena's consulting fee for the day exceeded what she typically earned in 2 weeks of catering work, but the financial compensation was secondary to the professional recognition she was receiving. After years of invisible labor while pursuing her academic goals, she was finally able to demonstrate the expertise she had developed through education and experience. As the formal negotiations concluded for the day, Marcus Chen approached Elena with obvious respect. Dr. Rodriguez, your contribution today has been extraordinary. You have not simply facilitated communication, but created new possibilities for partnership that neither side had envisioned. Elena accepted his appreciation with professional gratitude while maintaining appropriate humility. Thank you, Mr. Chen. It has been gratifying to help both organizations find common ground and shared opportunities. Victoria Sterling joined the conversation with her own expressions of appreciation. Elena, I hope you will consider making this consulting arrangement permanent. TechVision needs expertise like yours as we expand our international operations. Before Elena could respond, Marcus Chen made his own offer. Dr. Rodriguez, Golden Dragon Enterprises is planning to establish a North American headquarters here in New York. We would be honored if you would consider leading our international partnerships division. The competing offers represented a complete transformation in Elena's career prospects. 3 days earlier, she had been anonymous catering staff struggling to balance work and graduate studies. Now 2 major corporations were competing for her expertise and offering senior positions that would establish her as a leader in international technology cooperation. Elena considered both offers thoughtfully before responding. I am deeply honored by your confidence in my abilities. However, I hope you will understand that my immediate priority must be completing my doctoral dissertation. I would welcome the opportunity to discuss these possibilities after I defend my PhD next spring. Marcus Chen nodded approvingly. Academic achievement must always take precedence. Your commitment to excellence in education demonstrates the character and dedication that would make you valuable in any organization. Victoria agreed enthusiastically. Absolutely, Elena. And please know that TechVision would be delighted to support your research financially if that would help you focus on completing your degree without the distraction of financial concerns. The offer to eliminate her financial worries while completing her dissertation was almost overwhelming in its generosity. Elena had been working multiple jobs for years to support herself and contribute to her family's expenses while pursuing her academic goals. The possibility of focusing entirely on her research represented a dream she had hardly dared to consider. The following day brought the culmination of the negotiation process. Elena arrived at the boardroom to find both teams energized and optimistic, a dramatic contrast to the tension and frustration that had characterized their interactions just 3 days earlier. The preliminary agreements were ready for signature, incorporating the innovative partnership framework that Elena had proposed. Marcus Chen's legal team had worked through the night to incorporate Elena's suggestions into formal contract language, while TechVision's attorneys had developed complementary provisions that addressed American regulatory requirements. The resulting agreements represented far more than either side had originally envisioned when the negotiations began. "Dr. Rodriguez," said Dr. Sarah Kim as the teams assembled for the signing ceremony, "I wanted to thank you personally for what you have accomplished here. You have not only saved this negotiation, but created something better than what either side had originally proposed." Elena appreciated the recognition while maintaining focus on the substantive achievements. "Thank you, Dr. Kim. I believe both organizations will benefit significantly from this partnership structure. The quantum computing industry needs international cooperation to reach its full potential." The signing ceremony itself was brief but significant. Marcus Chen and Victoria Sterling signed multiple copies of the preliminary agreements, while their respective teams witnessed the formal commitment to move forward with the partnership. The final agreements would require additional legal review and board approvals, but the fundamental framework was now established. As the ceremony concluded, Marcus Chen addressed the assembled group in both English and Mandarin, acknowledging the significance of the partnership and specifically recognizing Elena's contribution to its success. His words carried particular weight given his status as one of China's most respected technology executives. "This partnership represents more than a business arrangement," Marcus Chen concluded. "It demonstrates that cultural differences can become competitive advantages when approached with understanding and respect. Dr. Rodriguez has shown us that expertise and wisdom can be found in unexpected places, and that true communication requires more than simply translating words." Victoria Sterling added her own remarks, emphasizing the technological and commercial potential of the partnership, while acknowledging the crucial role that Elena had played in making it possible. "3 days ago, we thought we understood the challenges and opportunities in international technology cooperation. Dr. Rodriguez has shown us that our understanding was incomplete, and that success requires insights that cannot be found in textbooks or professional training alone." The conclusion of the formal negotiations marked the beginning of Elena's transition from invisible service worker to recognized expert in international technology partnerships. Her consulting fee from TechVision would indeed allow her to reduce her catering hours significantly while completing her dissertation research. More importantly, she had established professional relationships and demonstrated expertise that would open doors throughout her career. 2 weeks later, Elena received notification that her dissertation committee had approved her research proposal with enthusiasm. Her work on cross-cultural barriers and quantum computing commercialization had been strengthened significantly by her practical experience with the TechVision Golden Dragon negotiations. She now had a real-world case study that illustrated the theoretical concepts she had been developing through her academic research. The transformation in how colleagues and professors viewed Elena was dramatic and immediate. Faculty members who had barely acknowledged her existence now sought her insights on international technology policy questions. Graduate student colleagues who had seen her primarily as someone who disappeared frequently for work shifts now recognized her as someone with valuable professional experience and expertise. Dr. Michael Chen, her dissertation advisor and coincidentally no relation to Marcus Chen, was particularly impressed by Elena's practical application of academic concepts. "Elena, your experience with this negotiation has elevated your research to a completely different level. You now have empirical evidence for theoretical frameworks that most scholars can only discuss in abstract terms." Elena's academic work began attracting attention beyond Columbia University. She received invitations to present her research at conferences on international business and technology policy. Professional organizations asked her to contribute articles on cross-cultural challenges in technology transfer. The invisible catering worker was becoming a recognized voice in her field. The financial impact of her consulting work was equally transformative. For the first time since returning to the United States, Elena could afford to reduce her work hours and focus primarily on her academic goals. She was able to contribute more substantially to her mother's medical expenses while maintaining her own living expenses without the constant financial stress that had characterized her graduate school experience. 3 months after the successful conclusion of the TechVision Golden Dragon negotiations, Elena received an unexpected phone call from Dr. Jennifer Walsh, director of the Center for International Technology Policy at Georgetown University. Dr. Walsh had learned about Elena's role in the negotiations through professional networks and was interested in discussing potential opportunities. Dr. Rodriguez, Dr. Walsh began, using Elena's anticipated academic title. I understand you played a crucial role in facilitating one of the largest technology transfer agreements between American and Chinese companies in recent years. We would be very interested in having you consider a postdoctoral fellowship position here at Georgetown. The offer represented another unexpected opportunity, resulting from Elena's moment of visibility in the Meridian Tower boardroom. Georgetown's Center for International Technology Policy was one of the most prestigious research institutions in her field, and a fellowship there would establish her as a leading scholar in international technology cooperation. Elena's response reflected the confidence she had developed through her recent experiences. Dr. Walsh, I would be very interested in learning more about the fellowship opportunity. I expect to defend my dissertation next spring, and I would welcome the chance to continue my research in such a distinguished setting. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with Dr. Walsh expressing genuine enthusiasm for Elena's combination of academic rigor and practical experience. Few scholars in the field had direct experience with high-level technology negotiations, and Elena's linguistic abilities and cultural understanding made her particularly valuable for research on international cooperation. As spring approached, Elena's life had transformed completely from the difficult circumstances she had endured just months earlier. Her dissertation research was progressing rapidly, strengthened by the real-world insights she had gained through her consulting work. The financial pressures that had forced her to work multiple jobs had been eliminated, allowing her to focus on academic excellence without constant worry about basic living expenses. The defending of her dissertation in late April was a triumphant conclusion to years of struggle and sacrifice. Elena's research on cross-cultural barriers in quantum computing commercialization was praised by her committee as groundbreaking work that combined theoretical sophistication with practical relevance. The TechVision Golden Dragon case study provided compelling evidence for her analytical framework and demonstrated the real-world applicability of her recommendations. Dr. Michael Chen, her advisor, was effusive in his praise during the defense. Elena, this work represents exactly the kind of scholarship that can make a meaningful difference in how international technology cooperation is conducted. You have identified specific barriers and provided practical solutions that organizations can actually implement. The completion of her PhD opened doors that had been closed throughout her earlier career. The Georgetown Fellowship offer was confirmed immediately after her successful defense, providing her with a prestigious platform for continued research and policy influence. TechVision and Golden Dragon both renewed their offers for senior positions, while other technology companies began approaching her for consulting opportunities. Elena's choice to accept the Georgetown Fellowship reflected her commitment to advancing knowledge and policy in international technology cooperation. The position would allow her to conduct research, influence policy discussions, and train the next generation of scholars and practitioners in her field. The invisible catering worker had become Dr. Elena Rodriguez, recognized expert and policy leader. The Georgetown appointment came with an impressive office, research funding, and the opportunity to work with government agencies and international organizations on technology policy questions. Elena's first major project involved developing guidelines for cross-cultural technology negotiations for the Department of Commerce, drawing directly on her experience with the TechVision Golden Dragon partnership. 6 months after joining Georgetown, Elena received an invitation that brought her story full circle. Marcus Chen was visiting Washington for a conference on international technology cooperation, and he specifically requested a meeting with her to discuss Golden Dragon's expanding North American operations. They met in Elena's Georgetown office, a setting that would have been unimaginable during their first encounter in the Meridian Tower boardroom. Marcus Chen was clearly impressed by Elena's academic achievement and professional advancement, but their conversation focused primarily on substantive policy questions rather than personal recognition. Dr. Rodriguez, Marcus Chen said as their meeting concluded, "Your journey from our first meeting to this office represents something important about recognizing talent and providing opportunities. Golden Dragon has implemented your partnership framework successfully, and we continue to benefit from the insights you provided." Elena reflected on the transformation that had brought her to this moment. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate your recognition and support. That day in the boardroom changed my life, but it also reminded me how many talented people remain invisible simply because they lack opportunities to demonstrate their capabilities." The conversation touched on broader questions about talent recognition and opportunity creation in international business. Both Elena and Marcus Chen had learned important lessons about assumptions, perceptions, and the value of looking beyond surface appearances to identify genuine expertise and capability. As Elena's reputation grew within academic and policy circles, she began speaking at conferences and writing articles about her experience. Her story became a powerful illustration of hidden talent and missed opportunities in professional settings. She emphasized not just her own transformation, but the broader implications for how organizations identify and develop human potential. "My story is not unique," Elena would tell audiences at professional conferences. "Every day, in offices and hotels and restaurants around the world, there are people with remarkable capabilities working in positions that make them invisible to those with the power to recognize and develop their talents. The question is not whether this talent exists, but whether we have the wisdom to see it and the courage to act on what we discover." Elena's academic research continued to focus on practical applications of cross-cultural understanding and technology cooperation. Her work influenced policy discussions in Washington and contributed to improved guidelines for international technology partnerships. The invisible catering worker had become a recognized voice in shaping how American companies engage with international partners. The TechVision Golden Dragon partnership, meanwhile, had exceeded all expectations for success. The joint research facilities were producing breakthrough innovations in quantum computing applications, while the manufacturing partnerships had reduced costs and improved quality for both organizations. The framework that Elena had proposed during those crucial days in the Meridian Tower boardroom had become a model for other international technology collaborations. 2 years after her initial intervention in the negotiations, Elena received an honorary consulting appointment with both TechVision and Golden Dragon, recognizing her ongoing contributions to their partnership's success. The position required minimal time commitment, but provided her with continued insight into how her theoretical frameworks performed in practical applications. Elena's office at Georgetown had become a destination for students and scholars interested in international technology policy. Her combination of academic rigor and practical experience attracted visitors from around the world who wanted to learn from her unique perspective on cross-cultural business cooperation. The jade pen set that Marcus Chen had given her remained prominently displayed on her desk, serving as a daily reminder of the moment when cultural understanding and technical expertise had combined to create unexpected opportunities. The inscription about wisdom revealing itself through action rather than appearance had become a guiding principle for Elena's continued work in academia and policy. Elena's story had become part of Georgetown's institutional culture, regularly shared with new students as an example of how academic knowledge could be applied to solve real-world problems. Her experience demonstrated that expertise could emerge from unexpected places, and that cultural understanding was as important as technical knowledge in international cooperation. As Elena looked toward the future, she remained committed to research and policy work that could improve international technology cooperation, while creating more opportunities for talented individuals to be recognized and developed regardless of their backgrounds or circumstances. The invisible catering worker had found her voice and platform, and she intended to use both to make a lasting difference in how talent is identified and nurtured in professional settings. The transformation that began when a tech billionaire spoke frustrated Mandarin and only the catering worker responded had rippled outward to influence academic research, policy development, and business practices. Elena's journey from invisible service worker to recognized expert had become more than a personal success story. It had become a catalyst for broader conversations about talent recognition, opportunity creation, and the value of looking beyond surface appearances to discover the capabilities that exist all around us. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.